Hello and welcome to Building the Premier Accounting Firm. I'm your host, Roger Knecht, and we're actually going to discuss today something very, very timely. Mental health and a lot of the mental struggles that sometimes we face as we're running our businesses and coping with the life that we each live. Now, in doing this, I'm actually inviting a guest back, a previous guest that I'm sure many of you heard and enjoyed listening to. It's Randy Crabtree. Randy's an expert in this in a variety of ways, partly because of personal experience, and I'm looking forward to this discussion. Randy is actually the host of his own podcast, the Unique CPA. It's ranked as one of the top 5 most popular shows on the podcast spectrum, and I expect to be there someday. He is also the co-founder of partner of Tri-Merit Specialty Tax Professionals. He's an author, lecturer, and the president of a 501c3 Stroke Survivors Empowering Each Other organization, and part owner of an award-winning craft beer and bottle shop in Chicago. Definitely a destination to go see when you're in the area. In December 2021, he was also listed as a one to watch in the section of the Accounting Today and is among the 100 most influential people in accounting. In May, he was appointed also into the Tax Council for a 3rd term. So, Randy, welcome to the show.
Roger, thank you. I appreciate being here. I had a great time last time we did this, and I'm really looking forward to this time as well.
Thank you. This is going to be fun. So this is going to be kind of an off topic, definitely not really accounting in namesake, but mental health. And I think this is something a lot of people can relate to. In fact, I'll dare say everyone can relate to. We all experience life. And one of the first things that I think really steps into this is stress. Would you agree stress is a good place to start this discussion?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as a profession, accounting profession, we deal with stress all the time, and stress is a great place to start. And just I want to back up a second because you did mention I'm an expert. I am not an expert when it comes to dealing with the mental health issues and the stress and the burnout from that standpoint. But I am from what you said it. Personally, I've gone through some things, so I can share my story, and my story I think people can relate to, and we can go from there. But man, if you are really dealing with something deep, you really need to seek out professional medical experts, and I'm just going to help highlight what I went through. So yeah, let's start with stress.
Well, no, let's go back to the story because I think everyone has a story.
Yeah.
We've all, because of being an entrepreneur, because we live lives, perhaps as parents. I mean, whatever the case may be, I'm sure we can all reflect on very stressful situations in our lives. It could be the losses of loved ones. It could be job changes. It could be starting the business, for heaven's sake. It could be health situations. But stress comes. It's natural. It's part of our mortal existence.
Yep.
And you have a story to share there that really is a challenge and something that even led to you creating the 501c that I mentioned. So tell us about your story.
Yeah. Okay. We'll start with that. So my story, and we can relate this to business because you can hit these things, this stress that come into your life, and which could turn into burnout and all that. But for me, what happened is it's a health issue that happened with me. But again, we can equate this to anything. And so for me personally, 9 years ago, I had a stroke. At the time, I was managing partner of our firm. And so there was stress with that as well. And stress may have brought on the stroke. You can never tell for certain. But, I was working pretty hard and that may have some related to it somewhat. But for me, what happened is I had the stroke 9 years ago. Was completely fine within a couple months from a standpoint that when I had the stroke, I lost my ability to speak. I lost my whole left side. I fully recovered, which is not normal. I am one of the, I think it's 8% of people that suffer a stroke fully recover, or at least feel they fully recover. Obviously, I have a little bit of brain missing inside my head, but the rest of my brain took over. And so I was fortunate from that standpoint. What I wasn't fortunate with this 4 days after the original stroke, I had a second stroke. And that stroke was small. But what happened with me is I started, and it took about 6 months, but I started going down this path of, okay, it's going to happen again. And so stress related, I kept stressing out, I'm going to have another stroke. I would feel something in my head And we all do. We all feel there's something you do today. Everybody does. You don't notice it. I would notice it. I'd get dizzy, or I'd have a little bit of a tick in my head, and you'd feel this, and all of a sudden that was, I'm going to have another stroke. I'm not going to survive this time. I'm going to be disabled this time. What's my family going to do? And so that stress of constantly thinking that way created some mental health issues with me. One being PTSD. Every time that I had that, boom, panic attacks starting. Then I was going to die, and all of this keep going on created a depression then as well. Because what's the point? Why go on? What does it matter anymore? Because I'm just going to die anyways. The next stroke is inevitable. But that was all created in my head because of stress that I was going through, and it was the stress of thinking this is going to happen again. And we all, and you mentioned, we all deal with stress on an ongoing basis. And when we look at business, stress by itself is not necessarily terrible. Stress makes us act. It is, hey, we got this huge project that came in and we don't have a lot of time to work on it, but hey, stress kicks in and let's do this, and we're going and we get it done. That's fine on the surface, but then that uncontrolled stress where nonstop deadlines going on and on and on, and we finish one project and the next project's already a week behind, and now the stress of getting that uncontrolled stress is then where we can turn into burnout issues, and then the mental health issues that unfortunately I went through.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for sharing your story. That is, I think, something that people can relate to. And I liked how you explained the PTSD that came with it, the fact that things would trigger that, and it just causes you to fall into that state of depression, have those panic attacks. And I believe people can relate because there are things in the work that we do that may cause those things. And if we're not sharing them, if we're not communicating, we run the risk of just leaving these things all in our minds, and no one's even the wiser about them. And so I'm glad we're having this conversation. Yeah. I'm going to bring two things to this, just to comment on a few things that you mentioned. One, stress being good as well. I'm glad you shared that because stress does have a negative connotation, but the point is stress can be exhilarating. Mm-hmm. It can be motivating. It can be that drive that you need. It can actually give you that boost of energy because you've got a deadline approaching. So I think a lot can be accomplished when stress is channeled properly and managed appropriately. So definitely we want to take the stigma away from stress in and of itself. That can be really quite motivating for a lot of us. But the second thing I wanted to share is there's a flip side that I can add to this story as it relates to the stroke. Is I have a colleague, someone that I've worked with now for over a decade, and during COVID, he had a stroke while working at home, and coincidentally, his wife was at home with him. So he's working for us, and he has this stroke. Crazy story, but like you, he's one of those fortunate ones that, as I understand it, is fully recovered. But as an employer, this is what I wanted to bring to the table. As an employer, we had some decisions to make. How do we take care of this employee who's had a stroke? How do we work with his situation, accommodate his situation? Is he going to be able to come back? There were a lot of unanswered questions, and we had to make some decisions as a business to move forward. And obviously we wanted him to return, but this was a mental health issue. And could he return? I mean, we didn't know. And I'm happy to say that he did return. He's with the company. He's still very involved. He fortunately, like you, recovered as far as I can tell fully, but there was that period of time that it wasn't clear what to expect. It's not like he's got a cold and he's going to be out for 3 days. Right. It's not like he's got a stomach flu and he's going to be out for 24 hours. No, we're talking about a stroke here. And it was just an amazing experience to now reflect on and realize how wonderful it is that he recovered. But at the same time, and I don't mean to be boastful or whatever, but I'm pleased with how as a company we chose to handle the situation. And gratefully he's returned back, and he's been a phenomenal part of our growth and success since then. So that's all I wanted to add to this narrative that you've just shared. So let's go back into stress. We're experiencing stress. First of all, what do we do to identify it? The triggers. How do we stay on top of it so it is something that we can manage?
Yeah. So we deal with stress, obviously, and our profession has maybe perception, but it's reality too, of being a high stress profession. We do have these constant deadlines. We do have, clients that we don't want to deal with. We have things, we have bosses or people we work with. We just, put stress on us, and that just happens. It's just reality. But it's more so, I think, our deadline driven profession. But stress, again, by itself, not terrible. Uncontrolled stress is where we're having issues, and uncontrolled stress can turn into burnout. And burnout is the thing we all hear about. And burnout, people throw that term around like, okay, hey, I'm getting burnt out. But that's, I think, the key to what really is burnout. And burnout in general, and this is a definition that is like all over the internet. I'm pretty good at Google. And so I can search this stuff, and pretty much everybody defines burnout the same. And it's a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress. So it's workplace related. And then it's categorized by three things, really. You have energy depletion or exhaustion. Our profession, everybody at some point has this, especially when we're in tax season. You have increased mental distance from your job. So it's just like you just can't concentrate on what you're doing. You're starting to feel negative about it, a little cynicism about what you're doing. And then you reduce your efficacy. You reduce your ability to be productive is what's happening. And so that uncontrolled stress turning into burnout is really the major issue that we have to be concerned about as a profession, and doing what we can to control that.
Well, first, I appreciate the definition. I think that's excellent because it gives us some context to what we're talking about. And what I'd add is I personally feel a great thing to describe burnout as is it's physical. There is a physical exhaustion, a mental exhaustion. And I think that's stress wearing down the individual mentally, physically, emotionally. And all of a sudden you hit this burnout wall, as you've described. And that burnout, I'm going to simplify it. I'm going to make it real easy. And I think what it is it's a loss or a disconnect from the why. We all of a sudden just forget and can't connect to the reason why we're doing all this. And that burnout is because of that disconnect, we're just lacking purpose. We just don't see the reason why what we're doing matters. We don't see why what we're doing makes a difference. And all of a sudden that answer of burnout as to I need to again find my why, and I again need to find my purpose. How do I make a difference? How is what I'm doing relevant to myself, my client, my family, my personal being? So I'm liking this burnout. So once we've identified we're experiencing burnout, what do we do?
Yeah, and that's a good point. And if I could go back 1 second, because I loved what you just said there, the whole why, because I think the why sometimes creates the burnout, because most people's why, if you ask them, why do you go into this profession? Because I want to help people. The problem is we don't stop there. We don't just realize we need to help this person, this person. We have to help everybody. And that's what I think creates it. It's built into us somehow that we are the answer for everybody. And we are. I mean, honestly, we're the number one trusted advisor out there for most business owners, and taxpayers in general. So that's I think what creates it is that we don't know when to say no. We just keep thinking if we work harder and work longer, this to-do list will go away, which I'll never do it. Part of it's going to be controlling our to-do list. But that's, I think, I just wanted to expand on what you said with that why. I think that was great.
Thank you for that addition. Keep going, though.
Yep. So what can we do? I mean, there's a lot of things that if we don't control if we don't control the burnout, that can even go further. And burnout by itself is a mental health issue. Going into mental illness, which is what happened to me, we can get to that point, which we don't want to. So we need to figure out things we can do to not get to that point. So there's a few things that I talk about when I'm doing a presentation on mental health. And one of them is just, I quote other people. In doing and talking about this for the last year, I've learned so much from other people. And so I quote what I'm hearing solutions are that people are putting out there. And so there's this one managing partner of a firm out in Iowa. Her name's Courtney Durande. she is fully in on this. The book Free to Focus, but it's a full focus system, and it's basically just helping you block off your time so you could be more productive. There's certain times on your calendars where this is what you're going to do. You go into each day just knowing that you have 3 tasks that you want to focus on, not this 100 to-do list tasks for each day, but what's the 3 major things you want to work on. But you also create daily tasks, weekly tasks, monthly tasks. And if there's things on your to-do list that never make it up to that top 3, they're not for you then delegate that and make sure someone else is clear. So the one of the things I do is just talk about what she does and her full focus system. And then honestly, when you look at what she does, and they're to a point where they are maxing out at 45 hours per person during tax season. That's the max. You're only allowed to work that. The 3 years they've been doing this, they found that they've become more productive, more profitable, getting more work done in less hours, and just have a much better work-life balance. So something like that. And I know you know all this stuff too, and there's things I'm sure that you can, and I have other things too, but I want to hear, if you don't mind me asking, things that you're telling people that they can do to combat this.
Oh, yes, I actually do. Thank you for asking, because what I would contribute to this is when I'm having conversations and a person is at that overwhelmed stage. So they've definitely moved beyond stress. They're overwhelmed. Is one, they do need to do something proactive. Otherwise, it will become unhealthy. It will affect their physical well-being. It will affect their mental well-being. And you're right, it will progress into becoming perhaps a mental illness. So the first thing I say is, let's start talking about it. And there's a lot to be said for like group therapy. Anytime you can just kind of open up in a safe environment and be vulnerable, I think people just need to get out of their own heads and verbally communicate this. I think it's very therapeutic to communicate. And so if you have a trusted person, whether it's a paid therapist or it's a best friend, a peer, just start talking about it, because I think just expressing yourself opens that up. It's a start of the healing process. The second thing I would also add is, I think part of overwhelm is you just can't get out of your mind how big or daunting things are. And so the first thing I would do is encourage that the people actually chunk it down to the least denominating factors. What are the simple steps, the things that I can get done in the next hour related to that project? What can I do right now that can maybe whittle away at this thing that's overwhelming me? And rather than seeing things as this month-long project, week-long project, it's just, what can I get done this next hour, so that you can at least feel a sense of accomplishment, as if something's improving or getting better or being done. And then the other part of this that I would also add is, you hit it with delegate. I think we need to stop thinking we are the be all end all and do everything. We've got to get to the point where we can trust others, train others, lean on others, and it doesn't have to be perfect. We can actually have other people do it. What you've done by becoming no longer stressed but overwhelmed is, you're going to get to a point where you're going to freeze your body. And I don't know if people can relate to this like myself, but my body, when I go on vacation, it's not uncommon. In my past, I vacation too often now for this to happen. But in my past, when I'd go on vacation, it wasn't unheard of that my body would realize, hey, we're on vacation. It's time to get sick now. And I would just get sick on my vacation simply because my body realized I was relaxing, and I would just hit this mental exhaustion wall, this physical exhaustion wall, and I just needed to relax. Don't get to that point. Let's go ahead and delegate. And I liked how you mentioned that earlier. So those are a few of the contributing things I'd bring to the discussion.
Yeah, and what you just said was key, because delegation, and everybody, people listening, they'll all probably relate to this. What we do is we're reviewing something, and there's a simple fix, and we think, well, you know what, I'm just going to fix it, rather than teach this person what they did wrong, because it's going to take me a minute, and I just want to get this out the door. But then that minute happens every single time you're reviewing, and that keeps adding up. And then the person below you that you're supervising doesn't learn, and that just keeps adding up. And so taking that extra time to teach the delegation, teach the person you're delegating, I think is key, and it's going to free us up a ton over time. And if I can expand on one other thing you said too,
Yeah, please, please, please.
the whole reaching out to somebody. Let me kind of wrap up my story a little bit, because I went through this for 5 years, and it took me reaching out to a counselor, like you said, to get through the mental illness. It took me a long time to admit that I'm a mental illness survivor. I called it. I was going through a melancholy feelings rather than depression, which it really was. But the key was I didn't hide it from my family, or for the most part. There are certain things that I did not let them know, which we'll probably always find when people are going through this. But I finally reached out to counselors, went to 3 of them. The first one, and people in our industry will relate to this. The first one basically told me, well, you can't control this, so don't worry about it. And that's not what we do in this profession. We control things. We're the ones people come to for answers. And so that didn't work for me. But by the third counselor, she did something, and mainly it was listening. But I got to this point where I finally realized I can take charge. I don't have to listen to my head, and my head was in charge. I wasn't in charge. I didn't have to listen to my head. And I don't know what she did, but I was sitting in my, what I called my melancholy place. In reality, again, it was depression. Just, I wouldn't call it that, and didn't even really think it was that. But looking back, it was. And pretty much just said, G version here, F you, you're not real. Get out of my head. I'm not listening to you anymore. And after doing that for a week, I just started taking charge back. So going to a counselor, they're good. They're awesome. They can bring things out. Doesn't mean the first one you go to is going to have the answer, but don't give up if it's not.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning this, or at least elaborating on it. I'm going to add to it 2 more things. The first is, I think there's a stereotype that exists around counseling, therapy, and so forth that I'd love to dispel. I'd love to destroy it. And it's to believe that someone that is getting therapy or help like that is broken.
Right.
It is not that they're broken. It's that they've recognized that things can get better. I want things to get better, which is to say, you can be fine and just realize I need a life coach. I need a business coach. It's not because things are bad that you need that kind of assistance. It's that you're desiring to make things better. There's got to be a better, easier way to do this. And that's where, like business coaching, life coaching, you don't need to have a problem to benefit from therapy. You can go in even in a healthy state and actually find better ways to cope, deal,
Yep.
and motivate yourself. So by no means, let's remove the stigma associated with it and just accept the fact that it's okay to get this kind of help. And I encourage everyone to do it professionally. The second thing I want to say is, let's just get this out there. If any of the listeners is at a point where you've thought of, considered, it's crossed your mind to take your life and suicide has crept into the thought process, I plead with you, I beg you to now take this serious. These are not healthy thoughts that you're considering. Your life matters. You are important. You are special. And because of that, I want to encourage you to always kind of have in your mind the 988 suicide prevention hotline that's in the United States. For my international listeners, I believe there are other resources, but in the United States, there is a suicide hotline that is 988. Call, talk to someone. They're there. And I encourage you to, if that is something that is occasionally crossed your mind or is on the mind as a solution, remove that, address that, and get that help that you need. And I implore you to please do so and share this with other people. This isn't just for the listeners. I'm sure that some of us are dealing with friends or colleagues or family members that are in this same situation. Let's have the conversation. Be willing to have that. And if nothing else, listen, but definitely be willing to share that number of 988.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's something I always put at the end of my presentations on this as well. So, unfortunately, I know people that ended up knowing or thinking that was the solution, and that's not. And unfortunately, maybe unfortunately, that's what made me act, because I was afraid my head was going to tell me that was the solution, and I was getting to that point where it was like, what was the point? And so, believe me, it helped. I am every day is the greatest day I've ever had right now. And so, believe me, it's worth it.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. So, Randy, where do we go from here? You've got stress.
Yep.
You've got it to where we're just overwhelmed. We're now talking about resources and solutions. Where do
Yep.
we go from here?
Yeah, let me give you a couple more things that you can do, simple things you can do to just start reducing that stress in your life. And part of it is, what are we right now? We're on 24/7. It's just, that's what everybody is. We've got our phones, we've got social media, we've got, email at our fingertips. And what we need to do is we need to be able to turn off at the end of each day. You just need that refreshing time. And so another thing that I talk about that I've learned from others is, how do we turn off at the end of the day? And so I'm going to go through this really simple, but this is a longer process. But you need to come up with an end of the day routine that trains your mind, trains your body, that I'm done working now. When I leave the office, I'm done. And so 3 simple things that I've been taught by Brian Cush, actually taught me this, is learn to turn off at the end of the day by, 1, bookmark your work. Where were you at the end of the day? So you don't have to think about it. You're not going to think. Your mind now realizes you don't have to be worried about what you're doing tomorrow morning when you get in, because you've got notes sitting on your desk that are going to remind you, or on your computer or wherever, that where you're starting when you get in the next morning. Come up with a plan for the end of the day. What are you going to do when the day ends? I'm not thinking about work. Instead, what's my instead plan? Instead, tonight, I'm going to go to, me personally, I'm going to go to dinner with my wife. We're going to go to a movie. Tonight, I'm going to read a book. Tonight, I'm going to work on that woodworking project that I had been planning for a while. I'm going to walk around the neighborhood with the dog. Just come up with a plan that's instead of looking at my phone, instead of looking at emails, I'm going to do this. And then just do a mental shutdown at the end of each night. Besides those 2 things, whatever it is, mental and physical, close your computer. Boom. Now you're training your mind. It's the end of the day. I just closed my computer. I could forget about that. Do some kind of meditation to tell yourself the day's over. Do have some ritual you go through at the end of the day. And you're really just training your mind. My mind was trained negatively while I was going through stress. This is positive ways to train your mind that now I can shut down at the end of the day. So I think that's another simple thing we can do to just start changing our mindsets and giving ourselves time to regenerate our energy.
Would you mind if I add to this?
Yes, I would love it.
So one of the things that I've embraced, this is very important to me, and I teach it all the time, is part of what you're describing here, I refer to as being present. So you're talking about this disconnect. How do you move from one thing and transition into another? And it's leaving the office, going home, let's say. I refer to it as being present. And so I have a self-assessment that I do where in my day, if I cannot be present, if I'm spending time at the moment thinking about the future, what I'm going to be doing, and I don't mean in a healthy preparatory way. I mean, my mind is wandering there. Or if my mind is wandering to the past, I'm dealing with regret, or I'm dealing with I shoulda, woulda, coulda, and I'm not present. That is my red flag, the trigger that tells me I have things that are undone, that are weighing on me, that I need to address. Otherwise, I cannot be present. Because when I'm with my family, when I'm with my friends, when I'm watching a show, if my mind is wandering and I cannot focus on maybe something I'm reading, it's me telling myself, there's something undone that's weighing on me that I need to take care of. Otherwise, I cannot be I cannot be my best self. And so whenever I find myself in my day with my mind wandering, where it's not intentional planning or intentional reflection, that's my trigger to simply say, I need to actually stop and address whatever it is that's consuming me, and give it the attention that it's obviously needing. And that has helped me for a number of years just stay, I think, I'm going to dare say, not as stressed as I may have been in the past, because I've learned to manage and cope it better because of this very simple principle of being present. That's my trigger. If I find that I'm unable to be present, to stop and smell the roses, to enjoy the conversations I'm having, to listen to the people that I'm interacting with, to enjoy the moment, the movie, the venue, the meal, then something's out of whack, and I want to address it immediately. And so that's my feedback to complement what it is you're sharing here.
Nice. You're part of my presentation now. I'm adding that in.
I love it. I love it. Would you mind if I shared one more thing?
Hey, this is your show. You can share anything.
No, I want to compliment this. This is amazing. So one of the things that I've also been teaching, and this is kind of more towards the tail end of our conversation here, is the value of personal time. And so what I would add to this is there's been a number of studies, and this is part of my presentation when I give mine, just so you know, Randy, I likewise have a similar presentation. This is how I end mine. And I talk about personal time, and I want everyone to hear, because I really feel a lot of us are workaholics, myself included. I find so much joy and satisfaction working. I tend to want to always work. But what I learned years ago is the value of vacations and time off. And it doesn't mean like a 3-week vacation to Europe. What I'm talking about is something that you can look forward to and anticipate. And the studies have shown, they've done so many studies on this that clearly show that if you have something that is no farther out than 8 to 12 weeks that you can look forward to, you actually reset. You get the endorphins and the excitement, the enthusiasm of preparing for planning, anticipating that event. And so the joy of the vacation actually precedes the actual time off. What they found in the studies is the fact that in the vacation, we typically overwhelm ourselves. We wake up earlier than we typically do. We put in a stock full day of activities. We stay out later than we generally do. We play games. We have late conversations. We do things longer than we generally do at home. And we're doing this in some instances multiple days in a row. So it's not uncommon to hear someone say that when they come back from their vacation, they need a vacation from their vacation. And these studies show that honestly, the vacations typically don't go as we planned. They have hiccups. Things don't go as they're intended. And so frustrations come up, disappointments occur. The benefit of the vacation actually is before the event. And so that's a huge thing. And so they say you have to have something that you're looking forward to within no more than 8 to 12 weeks. And then secondly, when the vacation is over, you have to have something else on the calendar that you can now look forward to once that one's finished. Otherwise, a state of depression comes in because you just finished this thing that you've been looking forward to. It's over and you have nothing on the horizon. And so the studies pointed to you have to always have something also on the calendar that you can now begin planning for. And I can go on and on what these studies revealed, but I'm just wanting to stress the importance of you need a break. You need a way to reset your clock, to re-energize. You need time to step away. And it's oftentimes when you disconnect that sometimes the problems, the challenges that you're facing will actually be answered because your mind is now more clear. So what would you add to that?
Well, I completely agree. And I personally have another 16 days till my wife and I go on a 2.5-month Southwest trip. And I've been looking forward to that, but I got to make sure I have those more often planned during the year. And it's a working trip, but also it'll be a fun trip. But we just head on the road. But I agree completely because I've been on the road since May 1st this year, and we're talking on December 15th right now. And I've pretty much been on the road nonstop. And I haven't had that built in. And in the past years, I've had that trip built in, the summer trip, whatever. And I really haven't had that this year. And I can notice a difference. And so I can real life experience show that for the first time in years, this 7.5 months of travel or whatever the time is kind of worn me down a little. And I'm a very aware of that and thinking, how do I do it different next year? Because I love what I do. I love being out. I love educating. But I can't let myself feel tired at the end of the travel season like I did this year. So I'm going to take your advice. I'm going to at least build in a couple of those trips next year during the travel season.
Please do. And just a quick clarification. These could be simple things. It's a staycation where you're actually just doing an extra day over the weekend. It's a weekend where you're looking forward to an activity with friends or family. It doesn't have to be anything momentous. It's the fact that you have something on the calendar that's scheduled, you're looking forward to, you're discussing with friends and family. And it's that anticipation building up to the event that matters. That's what's
Yep.
rejuvenating. And so
Yep.
that's what we're talking about. I could go on and on about it just based on the studies, and I think it's fascinating, but that's how I typically end my presentation about this is you've got to live life. You cannot work to live. You can't live to work. You have to work to live. You've got to make it a means to an end and find something you can get excited and passionate about. And that's oftentimes where the passion comes back in. That's where the life starts to come, the reason, the why returns. So many good things. All right. So what would you do to end this, Randy? How would you wrap it up?
I'd wrap it up as just enjoy what you're doing. And if you're not enjoying it, make sure you do some things to make some changes on that. The one thing that we didn't touch on, or we did because you said it with the looking forward to something is, and we do this as a company, is just make sure that we allow everybody to bring their whole selves to work, not just their job title, and incorporate their whatever it is, travel passions or anything else in. And I think that makes a huge difference when you're creating friends through your shared passions at work. That makes a big difference as well. So the final thought I'd have on that is that, hey, and you said it, if you're going through anything, reach out, don't keep it to yourself. And then just find somebody that can listen and help you through whatever you're struggling with.
Beautiful, beautiful. Randy, great having you on the show. I honestly think that when you hear the title, Building the Premier Accounting Firm, many people may not think that this would be a topic we would cover. They're anticipating maybe debits and credits, tech stack, client relations, mental health. Excellent topic. I'm glad this is one of a few times we've discussed this. I've got other episodes where this has been covered, and I'm so grateful that we have. This is so insightful. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to basically summarize our conversation a little bit and come back to you for a final thought. Before I do the summary, I do want to invite the listeners. If you'd like to have Randy come, he does this presentation for organizations. I likewise have a similar presentation. Feel free to go to the episode description and there get the information regarding Randy and what he's able to do. He's more than happy to travel and so forth. Obviously expecting the expenses to be picked up and so forth, but nonetheless, provide this presentation. He's done it as a webinar and so forth. And so if you have a firm, a number of employees that you feel would benefit from this, if you've got an association, he's offered to make that possible. So definitely to go to the episode description for information on how that can be done. As a summary, one of the things that I wanted to do is, first of all, is just start with the fact that I think we're all experiencing life. Life brings with it its challenges. We all have stress. I thought it was nice at the beginning to, first of all, recognize that stress is neither good or bad. It's just life, but obviously it does happen. And if we don't cope with it and so forth, it can then build to where it's overwhelming. And that's where it becomes debilitating. I'm grateful for how Randy chose to describe what that state is. And literally at that point, we looked at solutions, ways to better cope, transition from that. We clearly identified that working with a professional therapist or coach is a definite viable solution and one that we would encourage. Tried to remove the stigma associated with that, and at the same time, just invited people to recognize some of those things that might be triggers that are leading to those types of challenges, and then find ways to then move past it, finding our why, finding our passions, being willing to delegate. So I'm glad that we offered some solutions in the conversation today. I really appreciate the fact that we went even beyond that and talked about things that we can be doing that are proactive to help us avoid or cope with the stress. Really enjoyed the conversation about vacations to personal time. I think that's hugely important. Could have talked a lot more about that. I personally try to have something on the calendar no more than 8 weeks out. So I typically travel. I just was in Puerto Rico just a few weeks ago, was in Dominican Republic. In a few weeks, I'm going to be going to Costa Rica. So I definitely practice what I preach and am proud of that. And lastly, I contributed to the conversation the concept of being present. And I think that is hugely important. It's for me that telltale sign that I pay attention to. It's that inner voice of mine that I think is just kind of that litmus test of, hey, am I okay or am I stressed? And can I be present? And then that's something that I was grateful I was able to kind of contribute to the conversation. So Randy, wonderful discussion. What final thoughts would you add?
Final thoughts I'd have is don't make this overwhelming. If you want to make some changes, start with something simple. If it's going for a walk 15 minutes during the workday just to clear your mind, do that. But just start something simple, because this is too high of a stress profession to ignore it. And let's figure out ways where we can do better.
Beautiful. Let's be there for our clients. Let's be there for ourselves. Let's be there for our firms, our employees. Let's be there for ourselves. Let's be there for our families. Yeah, a lot of people are relying upon us. We do matter, and life's wonderful, and I hope you can enjoy it. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Obviously, everyone, if you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, please do so. We've got to get up there and match Randy and get up into that top 5%. So let's do that. There are numerous other episodes that I also invite you to listen to, where I've had guests on that are experts in their own rights on how to run and, in fact, have the premier accounting firm in your area. So we're addressing various topics that you can go binge and learn from and apply in your company. So do so. As for Universal, we have an annual event, GrowCon, where each year we get together with peers. You get to hear from the experts, and as a conference, literally see what you can be doing to work on your business. I invite you to find out more about GrowCon. Literally register, attend, and make that a definite part of your yearly experience as you're working on your business. Go to the episode description and find out more about GrowCon with Universal Accounting. Also, with regards to these principles, concepts, feel free to reach out to us directly if you'd like to discuss these and learn more on how you can apply these in your business. Give us a phone call. You can contact us at 801-265-3777, or you can visit us online at universalaccountingschool.com. And always remember this: if it is about accounting, it is universal. Take care. Be safe out there. Put a smile on your face, and always be safe while you travel. See you next time on the show. Take care.